Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Inside the Lines podcast. It is December 31st, the last day of 2017. Happy New Year's Eve in snowy Philadelphia, PA, to my boy Dan Black. How you doing today, sir?
The Eagles lost, but it was a pointless game anyway, so it is what it is. I don't really care. It's very snowy out and very cold, so that's not cool, but it is what it is. It's winter.
Yeah, we're buried under some snow here in South Bend as well. But the Eagles, they still wrapped up the number one overall seed, correct?
Yeah, they did that last week. They got the first round bye, number one overall seed, all the home field advantage, all that stuff. It's all good stuff. Nate Sudfeld looked good, though.
Yeah, IU. Shout out to IU, our quarterback that's still in the pros. But like you said, meaningless game for the Eagles. The NFL playoff picture is coming into focus as Week 17 is underway. The Browns now joined the 2008 Detroit Lions, 0-16. Just finished watching that game. So
that drop pass, though.
What?
That drop pass.
Oh my gosh, that DeShone Kizer was rightfully upset about that. Hit him right in the hands. Had a chance to beat the Steelers. Could have got a pretty good win, but it's the Browns, so something had to go wrong. 0-16 are the Cleveland Browns.
It was the definition of their season.
Yeah, officially now. So craziness. I want to talk some college bowl games here with you today, as now most of the bowl games have wrapped up, but we still got the most important ones tomorrow. That is the playoff games, as well as three other games that will be underway. Major takeaways from this year's bowl season. I know we're both we watch all of them, even though a lot of them are meaningless. So any big takeaways for you?
The Big Ten proved that it's the best conference in football, in college football, without a doubt. Currently 7-0. They still have to wait for Michigan. I think Michigan plays tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 1 o'clock against South Carolina.
Yeah, so I mean, Michigan been an up and down year for them. The year didn't go as expected for them, but hopefully they can win the bowl game, and the Big Ten will be 8-0 in this year's bowl season. And it really solidified, I think, what a lot of people thought going into this season is that the Big Ten is the new top dog. The SEC, they had a great season. I mean, you have Georgia and Alabama both in the playoff, and people will say, well, how can the Big Ten be so good if they have no one in the playoff? They should have, in my opinion. I think Ohio State should have gotten in had they not gotten blown out by Iowa. They would have easily gotten in my opinion. But nonetheless, to go 8-0, or hopefully 8-0, is not that. It's not that easy to do for a whole conference. So that to me sort of proves that they're here. They're going to assert their dominance at Ohio State game. I think they kind of were trying to show the committee that they screwed up, that they should have been in it instead of Alabama. So we're going to put the beat down on them. And that's what they did. And in my opinion, Big Ten proved they are the top conference.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. I think the Big Ten is the best conference in college football. I said it on actually my show on WIUX. I think they're so obviously the best conference that's why I'm not shocked they didn't get in, is because when you've got so much parity and so many good teams, they're going to cannibalize each other. And that's kind of what happened. Like you said, if Ohio State had even lost close to Iowa, I think they would have had a good case to get in over Alabama, but that wasn't the case. It's interesting, though, because there were two major conferences for the first time that were left out of the playoff, the Big Ten and the Pac-12, and you see how they went in very different directions. The Pac-12 went 1-7 in bowl games, so I think that kind of proves they were more of the joke conference, whereas the Big Ten just had so many good teams that there was too much parity for them to get in.
Well, I think a lot of people didn't have that high of expectations for the Big 12, or I'm sorry, for the Pac-12. They're not known, for having – they're a very top-heavy conference. Aside from USC, Washington obviously had a great season. Oregon was, all right. UCLA was decent. But other than that, Arizona State, Utah, all of them, nothing to write home about. So in terms of the fact that they went 1-7, I don't think that should surprise people. I'm sorry, Washington, very close, almost beat Penn State yesterday. Obviously, they had to deal with Saquon Barkley. That's never an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So I think they should have won, and I'm very upset that Penn State won because I'm not a big Penn State fan. But yeah, overall, I'm not surprised that they went 1-7. I don't think anyone thought that they would, win more than that, or more than half their bowls, because they're not that good. I mean, Northwestern just barely beat, I believe it was Arizona.
Purdue beat Arizona. Northwestern beat Kentucky.
Right. Okay, I got them. But yeah, I mean, Pac-12's aside from the Big 12, I don't think there's of the Power 5 conferences, I don't think there's a worse conference than them.
Yeah. So you do agree they're the worst major conference in college football?
I think we'll have to wait and see, because obviously we know that Oklahoma is going to be great. Oklahoma State is going to be usually pretty great or pretty good. We'll see what happens with Texas. We'll see if Baylor can figure it out with the new head coach who was in his first season this past season. Texas, what can Tom Herman do? So I think they're both similar in that after the first top 4 or 5 teams, there's not much. But, it's one of those things where it could waver back and forth.
All right. All right. Now, before we get off the Big Ten Pac-12 discussion, what's your opinion of Sam Darnold? Because that game, USC Ohio State, perfectly embodied the Pac-12 to me this season. Because, with Ohio State, USC both had 2 losses, and when it came to decision day for the committee, they had ESPN people at both locations. Ohio State thought they had a case to be in. USC really didn't, even though they had the same record, and you kind of saw why. When they played on the field, Ohio State far and away looked like the superior team. And Sam Darnold came in with so much hype this year. He was supposed to be the number 1 pick, the Heisman Trophy winner preseason. He didn't really deliver. Looked inconsistent at times, a lot of interceptions. But still, the opinion is he's going to be a top 5, maybe the number 1 overall pick, him or Josh Rosen at the quarterback position. So, am I missing something? I'm not a big believer in Sam Darnold.
Well, I think one of the things this season is they didn't have that much talent to throw to. It's not like if he was playing for Ohio State or something where you're going to have a lot of options. I don't think he had a ton of options to throw to. But I think it did also show that how weak of, at least offensively, how weak of a conference the Pac-12 is, because you look at what Ohio State did, they buried him. I mean, he did nothing. They as a team did nothing, and Ohio State ran all over him. J.T. Barrett had a fantastic game as well. I don't think it changes anything about where Sam Darnold will get picked. No, it doesn't necessarily have to come out. I don't think him or Josh Rosen necessarily have to come out. I think they still have another year of eligibility. So
they do.
Whoever doesn't want to go to the Browns, whoever doesn't want to go to them more doesn't have to come out. I don't think it changes things. I think maybe, teams will look at it and say, well, can he live up to the hype? Can he actually play in those big games against a much better competition? At the end of the day, there's only so many options. There's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. I think we spoke about this before in our first podcast. There's so many teams that either have aging quarterbacks or have no real options.
Yeah.
So if they come out, at the top of the list, you got Baker Mayfield, who is an undersized quarterback who runs a 4.8 or so. So he's not as fast as people make him out to be. He's got all the off the field and on the field issues, for that matter, to go with. Josh Allen had a down season for Wyoming, and he also plays in a less than stellar conference with Wyoming. So, you don't have – I'm not sure about any of them, really. I think, in my opinion, the steal of the draft, whoever gets Lamar Jackson, I really do think that, because I think he's going to go later in the first round, I really do think that whoever gets him, if it's in the right system and they have a guy that can really help him with his mechanics and he doesn't need to start from day one, he's just so mobile. In an NFL like it is now, where it's so reliant on mobile quarterbacks, where the guys on defense are just so fast and so strong that you need to be able to move outside of the pocket. I think whoever can get him is going to win the draft in terms of quarterbacks. But, I think Darnold has the most upside. I think Josh Rosen right now is the better quarterback. But it depends on the system and whether or not these guys need to start day one, or whether they'll have half a season or a whole season or whatever to learn the game. So, I wouldn't say I'm all in on Sam Darnold, but whoever gets him, I don't think it's a bad pick.
Okay. You kind of answered my question with Lamar Jackson, but I wanted to get your take because I do have a list of quarterbacks, and if you were Cleveland or any other team up there high in the draft, maybe the Giants, if they're trying to move on from Eli, a team high up that needs a quarterback, you've got Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Mason Rudolph. That's 6 guys that are all projected to translate decently to the pros with the, depending on how you evaluate them. Who would you take at the top out of anyone in that list? Because for me, the way I would evaluate, Lamar Jackson has the most talent, but I'm not even sure he's a quarterback at the next level. Might use him, weaponize him at some other kind of position.
Right.
Baker Mayfield, I don't think he translates really at all. He's undersized, seems like a poor man's Johnny Manziel to me.
He's a better Johnny Manziel, which isn't saying much.
Oh, yeah. All right. Either way, but
it's not that good.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah, I think I would take Josh Allen. Grant, he was hurt most of this year, and he plays in a mediocre conference, like you said. I did watch his bowl game because I pretty much watched all the bowl games. And granted, he was playing Central Michigan, so you can't take a lot away from that. But he looked a little bit to me like Ben Roethlisberger. He's a taller guy that's not easy to bring down,
right.
Not a runner, but decently mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a team like the Giants could maybe, if he could sit behind Eli for like a year and then transition into starting, I think he would translate well at the next level. But apart from that, I'm not sure who else. Haven't seen a lot from Josh. Josh Rosen throws the ball really well, but that's never really translated to winning. Granted, in college, but right. I'm not sure. So, who's your number one?
That I don't see that much of a difference between a Josh Allen, a Sam Darnold, and a Josh Rosen. I think they all have their flaws, and I think they all have, their pluses too. They all have sort of that prototypical quarterback size. They're all about 6'3", 6'4", big bodied. I think Josh Rosen still has room to grow. He's kind of skinny. So I think if he had, 10, 15, however many pounds, I think that helps him a ton more. The issue with Josh Rosen is you don't know how into it he really is. That's one of the marks on him, is no one really knows how much he cares about the game. Whereas a guy like Sam Darnold or Josh Allen seem to not care where they get drafted as long as they're playing the game. So I still have to go with Sam Darnold. I think he has a great attitude. I think he has room to grow. I think if he can go to a place like a New York, and maybe they keep Eli another year, then at least he has time to learn under, a Super Bowl champion. And depending on what they do in terms of the head coaching, which I've heard a lot of. I've heard 3 of the Eagles coaches are in consideration for it, and 2 of them are offensive guys, which is always a positive in today's NFL, having an offensive-minded head coach, especially for a young quarterback. And they have a lot of weapons should they stay healthy. Now, that's obviously a huge blemish for the Giants this year, is that they had all their targets. They had Odell Beckham Jr. hurt. They had Sterling Shepard hurt. They had Brandon Marshall hurt. They didn't have a run game. They had a bad offensive line. So that's not good for a young quarterback. But then again, you have the Browns. So
you don't want to be in the Browns.
You don't want to be on the Browns, basically the answer. But I still got to go with Sam Darnold. Come on, both of them right there. Sam Darnold, I think he just has an it factor, and the difference between him and Josh Rosen I don't think is that great, that a guy with a positive attitude compared to a guy with a negative attitude. I think that's going to be the turning point. I think they all will be relatively successful if they can be put in the right, system. If they have a competent front office, if they have a competent coach that can help them. Because you look at Sean McVay, for example, we've seen the difference that a offensive mind, or even Carson Wentz, what happens when an offensive-minded head coach steps in and helps a young quarterback, they thrive. Whereas we don't see that with Deshaun. Right. So I think I still got to go with Sam Darnold. He didn't have a ton of weapons to work with. I think if he gets weapons, he'll be very good.
Well, I hope the Cleveland Browns share your evaluation, because I'm not a big Sam Darnold fan. I don't necessarily think he's going to be as good as Rosen or Allen, but maybe that's just my Notre Dame bias coming through.
Yeah.
So please, Cleveland Browns, draft Sam Darnold, because no one has been able to be successful there. Before we get into the playoff games, because we are going to talk some playoffs, I wanted to give a few bowl game shout-outs because, like I said, I love the bowl games, watched them all, did the little ESPN challenge. I'm currently, not to brag, ranked – I'm in the 100th percentile, ranked 385th overall.
Out of how many people?
Pretty well. I don't – like a couple 100,000 do this.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It is a sick brag. But, so Georgia State, first win in bowl history. Shout out to them. Army, first 10-win season since 1996. Thank you for your service. Shout out to them. New Mexico State broke the longest bowl drought in FBS, 57 years. Their last one in 1960, and they won the Arizona Bowl. Shout out to them. And North Carolina A&T, second undefeated season in school history. Shout out to them. And shout out to Notre Dame for having a game on New Year's Day, because they can't let me down one more time in 2017 because they don't play in 2017. Shout out to them. Now, we're going to move on from the irrelevant games to the playoff games. We got to give our picks. Let's start with number 1 against number 4. It's the late game tomorrow. Clemson against Alabama, part 3. Who do you like in this one? What's the biggest factor?
I think I like Clemson.
Okay.
And I think it's their defense their defense is absurdly good. They're just really good. And I think that's going to be the turning point. We now have a bit of a rivalry between them after the past 2 years, them going back and forth in the national championship. Alabama winning 2 years ago, and then Clemson winning last year on that great at the very end, which sort of solidified Deshaun Watson's place in history and eventually where he'd go in the draft and whatever, all that good stuff. I have to go with Clemson, though. It's always hard to pick Alabama, but they didn't. I don't know. There's something about them. They don't seem like the normal Alabama this year. I don't know what it is, but that sort of just dominant juggernaut. Obviously, they're still much better than 99.9% of the teams in college football. But for Alabama, they didn't seem like they were as good as teams in the past. And for that reason, I think, and Clemson looks just as good this year as they did, aside from that Syracuse loss.
Yeah.
They look just as good this past season as I had the year before and the year before that. I'm going to go with Clemson.
See, I'm scared. I wanted someone to give me a reason to take Alabama, because I'm taking Clemson as well, and I don't even think, and this is how I know I'm going to be looking stupid on the very first day of the new year, I don't even know if it's that close. Like, I was looking for a reason to pick Alabama. and I couldn't find one. Like you said, Clemson looks just as good as last year. They had the one bad loss to Syracuse when Kelly Bryant, their quarterback, got injured. But last year they lost to Pittsburgh too, and then won the national championship. Alabama, yeah. Alabama hasn't beaten anyone. Their one tough game, you could argue, their best win, you could argue, was LSU. Their one game in the Iron Bowl, they were beaten by 2 scores by Auburn. So I just don't really have a reason to take Alabama. And Clemson, I knew I could name half of their roster last year with future pros. You had Deshaun Watson, Shaq Lawson, Wayne Gallman, Mike Williams. All those guys are gone, and they look just as good this year, which is terrifying. But the one thing that I can't get over is Nick Saban with a month to prepare for this one team, and it's a team that beat him last year. He's not the reigning champion. There's so much motivation there for Alabama. And Nika Fitzpatrick, their linebackers, crazy. One of the best players in the country. But so I guess my only question is if Kelly Bryant can step up like Deshaun Watson is able to step up.
If he can step up, that defense is going to take care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about whether, like you said, Kelly Bryant could step up. Because if that's the case, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So I'm going to risk looking stupid. I'm with you. I'm going Clemson by about 14 points, I think.
I'd go about 10. I think
okay.
Closer than two touchdowns.
All right. Well, we will see. Let's go to the Rose Bowl at 5 o'clock. It's the earlier game tomorrow. Baker Mayfield and the number 2 ranked Oklahoma Sooners against the SEC champion Georgia Bulldogs. How do you see this one going? Oklahoma's got the number 1 ranked offense in the country and the number 1 offense in terms of explosive plays.
I think you have to look at it like any other Big 12 team. The offense is always going to be really good, but can the defense compete with other great offenses in more powerful a more powerful conference like an SEC where they're good on both sides of the ball? And I think it's going to be Georgia's run game with Nick Chubb that I think can really be the difference maker for them. I wonder about Ken Baker Mayfield. I think he'll be able to step up. Obviously, like you said, the best offense in the country. But can he break through against such a strong defense? Now, they did it against Ohio State, but that was a long, long, long time ago. And that was when Ohio State didn't have their legs under them. And now Georgia's had a whole season to have their legs under them. And they got to prove that they really deserve that SEC championship and that they really are as good as they are. And I think they are. So I truly do believe that the fact that Oklahoma hasn't really played that many great defenses this year, that always, to me, has an asterisk next to it. That, yeah, they have a really good offense, but it's much like we see, I think it was a couple years ago at TCU, they'd put up like 50 points a game, and then they, and then they played a real defense, and it wasn't the same situation. So that to me is sort of always, with that conference specifically, one of the swaying points, and that's why I got to go with Georgia. I think the run game, for one, will be the difference maker, and the defense being able to stop Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. I do think this will be the better game, and we agree again. I think you'll be able to tell a lot in the first couple drives. If Oklahoma's able to move the ball like they have been against those weaker Big 12 defenses, because the best defense they played all year was Ohio State. Like you said, that was back in week 2 when they were still figuring things out. If they're able to explode and get on the board early and make the game more of a track meet, then Georgia's in trouble because their offense is more methodical, move it down the field. And Oklahoma can score very quickly, but I don't think Oklahoma's going to be able to score that quickly against Georgia's defense. Baker Mayfield has been suffering all week with flu-like symptoms, so I think their one chance was Baker Mayfield kind of carrying them on his back, and I don't know if he'll be able to do that while sick. So I am going to go with Georgia as well. They've got two running backs, Nick Chubb and Shoney Michel, who are now the second and third all-time rushers in school history. behind only Herschel Walker. So that's saying something. They
And-
can run the ball.
And you had to remember DeAndre Swift. Shout out St. Joe's Prep here in Philadelphia. He had that big run in the SEC championship to clinch it. So, it's not like it's just them two that can do it. You also have a freshman who can make a big run here and there if need be. So that's something else to watch out for.
Yeah. Shout out to St. Joseph Prep in Philadelphia. I was just going to say, I was going to mention Swift. He's averaging 8 yards a carry. So he's another explosive guy they've got. The one thing I worry about with Georgia, because they've got a solid run game, solid defense, but if Oklahoma makes it a track meet, you've got a true freshman quarterback in Jake Fromm that's leading Georgia. Sorry, different Bulldog there, but that's an enormous spot for a true freshman, and he's not the passer that Baker Mayfield is. He's a great game manager. He can develop into a great passer because he's still very young, but he can't go toe to toe in a shootout with Baker Mayfield. At least I don't think so. I haven't seen him do it at all year. But I do think defense wins championships, and I think Georgia will be able to keep down a sick Baker Mayfield and win. I'm going to say they only get him by a touchdown. I'm going to say 27-20 Georgia.
I would agree with that. I think it's going to be about 35-27. I think it's going to be very offense heavy, but I still think Georgia will prevail on – 1 or 2 drives that'll be the difference maker.
All right, so we agree. This is shocking. All right, championship game. Let's see if we're on the same page. We've got Clemson then against Georgia. Game will be in Atlanta on January 8th. Who do you like to win it all?
That's an interesting because you got 2. I kind of like Clemson just from the experience factor. For the juniors and seniors, they've been in that. Should they make it, they've been in 3 straight national championships at that point. They have the experience of being on that stage. That defense is really good, and it's one of those situations. Can both quarterbacks step up? Kelly Bryant obviously wasn't a huge part of the team last year, but now it's his team. Can Jacob Fromm step up? Should they get to that situation? Can he step up in the biggest stage in college football? Will Clemson be able to stop that Georgia running game? Those are all the questions you have to look at. But I think just Clemson having the experience over a very inexperienced team, specifically at the quarterback position, specifically with that Clemson defense that's so strong, I would have to go with Clemson by 10. Say 34-24.
All right, here's finally our disagreement. I'm going to go with Georgia. I like the Dogs. That defense I think the defenses are about even. They both got phenomenal defenses, top 10 in the country. Here's the difference for me. Like you said, both got freshman quarterbacks leading them. You got Kelly Bryant and Jake Fromm, who's going to be able to step up. On Clemson, I can't point to one thing other than the defense or one guy that is going to win the game for them. For Georgia, I look at that running game and that attack with Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift, and Nick Chubb. And I don't know if I think Clemson will be able to contain them as well as anyone has all year. But I think eventually that they'll be able to power through, slowly wear down that Clemson defense and score. I think it'll be a low-scoring game, which maybe a lot of the fans won't like because on the national title stage. But you're going to have 2 great defenses and not the explosive player like Deshaun Watson that we've had in years past. So I think it'll be a low-scoring game. I just think Georgia's offense, with more name recognition, I'm going to put my faith in Georgia's run game because I don't know who to put my faith in on Clemson other than that defense and Dabo Swinney. So I'll go really low. We're splitting hairs. We're basically on the same page. I'm just going to go with Georgia. I think it'll be very low. I'll say 23-17.
Okay.
All right. So there are picks for the national title. So that means obviously it's going to be Alabama and Oklahoma, and we'll probably look foolish coming right after New Year's Day. But there you go. So those have been our bold topics for today. It's New Year's Eve, so we both got places to go. We'll make this a shorter episode, but we got to do our top 5 list. So for today's episode, we're going to do the top 5 things that happened in 2017. Can be sports, can be not sports, anything you want. So I'll give you the honors. First pick.
First, I think. Ooh, I think the first one's got to be huge. The Astros winning the World Series, specifically, one, because they never did it, and two, because of what was going on with the hurricane and all that relief. It's, one of those great stories where sports, once again, uplifts a whole city when it's down. And I think it just means so much more than just a World Series, just a championship. It was a way for everyone in the city of Houston and those that are just from Houston or whatever, or have ties to it, could rally around and not think about all the hardships that were going on, or even people that had other experiences. For example, 9/11, after, right after that, the Yankees game with George Bush throwing out the first pitch. That game was sort of a way for people in New York to be distracted from however they were affected by the 9/11 attacks. So I think this is very similar in that sense. So that to me is number one.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had that on my list as well, especially because you can't tell like the story of 2017 without mentioning all the hurricanes. We had Hurricane Harvey and Irma devastated Florida, Puerto Rico, Texas, and Houston was such a good story because after Harvey hit it so hard, the Astros, who've never won a championship, win the World Series, and in general, like you said, unite the city. Just a beautiful story. But Houston, things are looking up in the future for them as a sports town. They haven't always been the most recognizable sports town, but you've got the Texans were looking good before the Deshaun Watson injury. He'll be back next year. They've still got a loaded defense, so the Texans are looking bright going forward. The Rockets have only lost one game. I went back. They've lost one game where Chris Paul has played even 1 minute. So all their other losses have come with an injured Chris Paul. So the Rockets are at least contending for a championship. And then you've got the Astros, of course, reigning World Series champions. So hopefully sports can continue to unite a rebuilding city in Houston. So I got to go to my next one down the list here. I'm going to go with the anthem protest. Like it or not, that did happen in 2017. It dictated a lot of the storylines. I know back in 2016, I kind of thought the story was over with the whole Colin Kaepernick thing. But then again, you have the Trump presidency, and that was my number one, actually, because you can't deny that. Started on January 20th, and it's a whole new world, a lot of stuff people are not used to, and the anthem protest kind of came as a result of that, because sports and politics seem to be intersecting even more. So definitely the anthem protest for me.
My number two. Now, does it have to be a national thing per se, or can it just be like whatever?
No, just things that happened in 2017.
Okay, that makes it more easier. I think UNC winning the national championship in heroic fashion, especially the year after losing to Villanova and arguably I'd say the greatest college basketball game ever. Specifically championship game, but in my opinion, overall, the greatest game ever. They hit that one shot and everyone thinks it goes to overtime, and then all of a sudden Villanova breaks their heart, and it's just a matter of 3 seconds where for one side it's heartbreak, and for the other it's glory, and then in 3 seconds the whole thing flips. So to me, that's my number two.
We're very similar here, because I gotta say I have that on my list as well. I'll take the other side of the coin. Gonzaga finally breaking through. I mean, people have known about Gonzaga in March Madness for a while, but they had never been to the Final Four. They finally break through, get to the Final Four, get to the title game, and take UNC pretty much down to the wire. It wasn't quite the classic that the UNC Villanova game was 2 years ago, but Gonzaga kind of elevates themselves a little bit to now at least they've been there before. Like kind of like Butler did it. I mentioned Butler earlier by mistake. A huge fan of what they were able to do in March Madness a couple of times. Now Gonzaga to me is on that level of they've gone to the championship game. All that's left for them to do is
Win it.
Try to get back there and win it. But UNC, it's interesting. Like you said, 2 years ago, lose in heartbreaking fashion. They lose Marcus Page and Bryce Johnson. They make it back the next year and win the championship. And now they come back this year with 3 returning starters, Joel Berry, Pinson, and Lucas May. And they lose to Wofford. That was earlier this season. They lost the Wofford Terriers. They were projected to finish 6th in their own conference, ranked as the 160th team in the country, and they beat North Carolina on their home floor. So we'll see how North Carolina does in 2018. But a very interesting 2017. Shout out Wofford, something the Terriers will never forget, beating North Carolina.
Absolutely not. Third one, USA losing to Trinidad and then subsequently not being able to make the World Cup sort of changes people's outlooks on USA soccer, in my opinion. A lot of people thought with such a young team, specifically led by Christian Pulisic, that they were on the up and up, that they were going to be able to compete with, the top teams in the world, especially after the last World Cup, that they almost beat Portugal, they almost beat Belgium, 2 of the top teams in the world. And that was sort of a heartbreak. There was a lot of, people very confused and people very angry at them because obviously you don't expect to lose to Trinidad and Tobago, especially when you have guys that are playing for Dortmund, one of the better teams in European soccer. And who knows what people in what some of the players and who some of the teams that Trinidad and Tobago play for. Some of them may not even play professionally. There's actually some countries I know that the players have like just regular jobs and then compete internationally, whenever there's a game. So they may have a situation like that. And so I think a lot of people felt that this sets them back a lot. And not only in terms of development, but in terms of in the eyes of the Germans and the Englands and the Spains and all that, in which they may be saying, yeah, these guys really aren't as good as everyone makes them out to be.
Yeah, let's go ahead and mark it down. 2017, the year we found out the United States was not the best country in the world in soccer. Go figure. Did not know that. Lost to Trinidad and Tobago. I'm having to improvise here because you took some of mine, so I'll go ahead and bring in a hot take for my next one. The year LeBron passed the torch. That's what I'm going to remember. They lost in the finals to Kevin Durant and the Golden State Warriors, and then Kyrie Irving comes out, says how he is not a good teammate, doesn't want to play with him, takes his talents to Boston. I liked Boston to win the East when they had Gordon Hayward. Now I'm not so sure. Still think it'll be a compelling series in the Eastern Conference Finals. But I don't see LeBron. He'll, again, might prove me wrong. I don't think LeBron's going to win another championship. The West is so tough. And without the help of Kyrie Irving, he is getting up there in age. You're not seeing it affect his play. He's still playing at an MVP caliber. He still might be the best player in the world. I just think that slowly going forward, the narrative is going to become less about LeBron and more about some of these other stars like Kevin Durant, like Kyrie Irving, and the NBA is going to slowly start the process of moving on from LeBron.
I disagree with you in that. I think no. What I feel like is that the NBA has been, specifically the media, has been trying to push LeBron out of the spotlight because everyone knows that he should have been MVP at least 2-3 more times, and they refuse to give it to him. I always believe that they are tired of LeBron being in the spotlight, and they want Kevin Durant to be the main guy, specifically because he's been paired up with Steph Curry for now 2 years. They want sort of a competition between 2 teammates for who's the best in the world. And obviously LeBron is still the best, and he's sort of holding them back from that. I don't think he's passed the torch yet. For those that say, look what he did in the finals, well, look what LeBron had to do in the finals. He had to average a triple-double. The second best player on his team showed up for 1 out of 5 games. you're not going to stop a team that the year before broke the record for the greatest NBA season of all time and brought the second best player in the world onto said team when it's you versus 4 superstars. That's just not, you're not going to win. So for those that would use that as an excuse, I don't buy it. Now, in terms of your saying that he may never win a championship again, it depends on his career choice. Now, should he stay in Cleveland? I agree. Well, should he stay in Cleveland and they not bring any more superstars? I agree. Should he go to a place like a Houston?
Yeah.
Because then you're in a situation where if you can overcome the Warriors, who I think in a couple of years will have to dismantle, will have to, break up because all of those guys are going to want huge contracts. And part of the issue is, and part of what made the Warriors great these past, 3, 4, 5 seasons is that they can afford to have a deep bench too that's talented. Well, when you have to pay 4 guys, $150, $200 million over 4 or 5 years, you take away that depth that they've relied on for so many years. That's helped make obviously the stars are what make them go, but part of what makes them so strong is that when they're out, the bench guys can come up and do their thing and keep them in games or keep leads or whatever. So I think they're going to break up in a couple of years. And should LeBron, join a Houston with the James Harden or with Houston who has James Harden and Chris Paul and some depth, there's to me.
Well, that's interesting. I don't have an magic 8 ball. I can't tell you where he's going to go, but that's what I would say to that then is, I guess if he does win another championship in a couple of years when the Warriors break up, in a couple of years he'll be upper 30s. I would assume he would start to decline even more so. But then again, look at what he's doing now, and you look at Tom Brady. Maybe that's not the case, but logic would tell you he would start to decline. Would he be? Maybe he'll never be the best player on a championship team again, because if he joins Houston at age 36, 37, I'm assuming in a couple of years, I wouldn't think he'd be the best player on the team anymore. You've still got James Harden, who would be in his prime, scoring more. LeBron would maybe take a more facilitatory role, but yeah, interesting. Let's move on before we'll have plenty of time to talk NBA once football season ends. But let's finish up our top 5 real quickly here.
Whose turn is it? My turn.
Yeah, it's back to you.
So my 4th one would have to be Roy Halladay's tragic death. It was about a month or 2 ago. It wasn't too long ago. He died in a plane crash off the Gulf of Mexico. He was only, I think, 40. Hall of Fame pitcher. I saw him pitch when he played for the Phillies. A tragic loss at such a young age in such a tragic way. He was not only great on the field, but off the field, very involved in the community. So it was a hit to baseball and to baseball fans and to anyone that was just affected by him in any way. It was really tragic.
Yeah, definitely. I should have known you'd get some Philadelphia in there somewhere. I'm going to go back to college football this time last season and how he's progressed in the NFL. And my last one's going to be Deshaun Watson's coming out party. He was able to take down the behemoth that is Alabama in the national championship game, kind of takes center stage. And then we've seen there was a lot of talk that he might not even be the best quarterback in the draft class. Obviously, Mitch Trubisky out of North Carolina was picked ahead of him. DeShone Kizer, there was some rumbling about that. We've seen how he's done in Cleveland so far, unfortunately. But Watson has transitioned the best of anyone in that class. He looked absolutely explosive, fantasy football monster the few games he was able to play before getting hurt. So it is the year, to me, of Deshaun Watson, 2017.
I think I got one more, yeah? No.
Yeah? Yeah, probably.
Whew. Who's the last? I think I got to go with the Messiah himself, Carson Wentz, the rise of Carson Wentz, because it's more than football. Like, if you were to come to Philadelphia this year, very different situation. Everyone loves the guy. He's sort of a resemblance of hope, and finally we have a guy that can lead us possibly to a championship. Obviously, what other way for things to go than for him to tear his ACL and be out for the season, and then it's all seems like everything's over because those literally were grown men crying. Like, it was awful. But the fact that he made that progression from last year to this year, and he just looks like he fits the part, and he's such a great human being too. I don't know if you ever saw the E60 on him with a kid that died of cancer, but it's very good. Showed how much he cares about the community around here as well, and he's been very welcomed into it. He's just such a sign of what's so great about sports, and what it's so great to come in the city of Philadelphia with sports, and in the NFL in terms of the new chapter of quarterbacks.
All right, so you're going back-to-back Philadelphia's to end your list. I see you. I'll go last one. I'd be remiss if we go through all of 2017 best of without talking or mentioning the McGregor-Mayweather fight. That was something to remember, or maybe something to forget. It was long hyped up. They finally did make it happen, and both guys made a killing on it. A lot of money. Mayweather got to, what was it, 50-0 in his boxing career against a guy that had never boxed before. McGregor got the huge payday he wasn't getting from UFC, and we all pretty much bought the fight. Everybody wanted to see it. We got what we wanted. There was a lot of funny press conferences and trash talk and hype that led up to it. That was probably even better than the fight itself. But definitely, when you go big events in 2017, you got to talk McGregor, Mayweather. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here today, December 31st. We will see you guys in 2018. Thanks for listening. As always, for the last time in 2017, this has been Inside the Lines. We'll see you guys next time.